Welcome to STV News Hour, because the big discussion we're having next is something you should be interested in. Now, over the weekend, the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udoma, said that the rate of economic growth in Nigeria is still too slow. Speaking with journalists on the sidelines of the ongoing spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, Minister said more work still has to be done to accelerate growth. Our target is 7% by 2020. That will make me comfortable. About 7% will make me even more comfortable. And that is why we are working so hard. Kingsley Moghalu is a political economist, lawyer, and former United Nations official. He's also a deputy governor of the Central Bank from 2009 to 2014. He's also there to bite the bullet by aspiring for Nigeria's top job next year's general election. Great to have you join us this morning. And of course, hear the comments made by senior government officials with respect to the country's economy. Yeah. You think we're working hard enough to hit 7%?
Well, I have a different frame of discussion. For too long in Nigeria, we've been focused on GDP growth, but not on the growth of the per capita GDP, which is where it really matters. Now, GDP growth is necessary for development, but it's not in itself what is needed for development. So that focus on GDP growth has taken our eyes off the ball, and that ball is development, human welfare. You know, what type of healthcare do we have in this country? What type of educational system do we have in this country? What's the life expectancy? These are the kinds of things. What's the quality of life? So I think we are taking our eyes off the ball and, focusing on GDP growth. Many African countries have made that mistake. And that's why we saw the so-called Africa Rising phenomenon, which left us no better than we were before, fundamentally. Nigeria is stuck in that mode. Now, what we should be thinking about in this country is fundamental and structural economic transformation, not GDP growth. How do you remove the country from an unhealthy dependence on oil? That's the real issue. How do we industrialize Nigeria? How do we have an innovation-driven economy? These are the real questions that we should be asking and answering. And that's, you did indicate that I will be running for the presidency in 2019. That's my focus. That's what's going to be my focus as president of Nigeria, not to be quoting GDP growth statistics, but to be focused on the quality of life of Nigerians.
All right. The Minister of Budget, Udoma, says that the problem of Nigeria is not revenue, but debts. And we have a debt profile currently, according to the Debt Management Office, of about 22 trillion naira or $73 billion. How is this not going to affect the economy?
Well, of course, it will affect the economy. And the real problem with the debt profile of Nigeria is the ratio of, revenue to debt servicing. Yeah. They don't talk a lot about that, but that's where the real problem is. At least 60% of Nigeria's revenues are going to repaying its debt. And that's terrible. That really mortgages our future, because you don't have enough money left after paying your debts to really drive structural transformation and development in Nigeria. And that's the problem. It's not to talk about the debt to GDP ratio, because it's 23% and that's fine. That's not the point. The real point is the development impact of debt. And that's what I'm focused on. And that's what I think we should be focused on. I have said that Nigeria should stop foreign borrowing. We don't need to be borrowing these huge sums of money that we're borrowing if indeed we're managing our economy properly. And I suspect that this, our foreign debt has risen 3 times in the last 3 years. And I suspect that the reason is politically driven. There is a tension, there is a pressure to create an impression that certain things are happening in the economy, like infrastructure and so on. And because of that, the future of our children is being mortgaged. Foreign debt has never been helpful to Nigeria. We've been borrowing money for the past 40 years. I want you to show me exactly how it has transformed this country. All it has done is to just mess up our economy.
We're going to stay on the infrastructure problem for a while, but
Yeah.
tell me something, about this fixation with oil. If you hear the statistics, Nigerian officials now in the United States,
Yeah.
they have to wait for the president when
Yeah.
he gets in there for the visit with Donald Trump, and they have put up sort of impressive figures in their minds with what, for example, with our external reserves, $47.8 billion, number of Nigerians who are now paying taxes has risen to 7 million. They've got a number of impressive figures they're pushing out there saying that Nigeria is ready for business. President got into some trouble with the comments he made, for example, saying a lot of Nigerian youth were fixated on this oil thing. So they expect Nigerians the government to do certain things for them for free. The government appears also to be fixated on crude oil because those earnings for crude oil reserves have happened because of good oil prices in recent months, or even over the last 1 year, so the foreign reserves have come up. How do we get out of the fixation on crude oil beyond the rhetoric?
Well, I'm glad you said the government itself is fixated on crude oil. In fact, the government of Nigeria is the real culprit when it comes to fixation on crude oil. And I think blaming the youth of Nigeria, absolutely misplaced, absolutely inappropriate. A lot of our young people are looking for jobs. They can't find it. Unemployment has more than doubled in the past 3 years since this government came into place. So I think they're just chasing shadows. Now, how do we get out of oil? There are two things you need to do. First, the problem with Nigeria's economy is that there is no philosophical outlook to the management of Nigeria's economy. For you to actually become an economic giant, you must have a philosophical framework. Are you a capitalist economy? Fine. If so, what type of capitalist economy are you? Are you a welfare state? Are you a state capitalist economy? Are you an entrepreneurial capitalist economy? Or are you a crony capitalist economy? These are the things that, first of all, you need to sort out. Then you need to sort out what I call the philosophical foundations of creation of wealth. There are three conditions on which capitalist economies can prosper. Number one, you have to have property rights. We don't have property rights in this country. The Land Use Act puts land in the ownership of the state. Number two, you need to have innovation. And number three, you need to have capital. These are the three conditions for the success of any capitalist economy. So as president of Nigeria, if I were to be elected president of Nigeria, I will focus on creating these three conditions. And then you will see the economy begin to boom. So, but we don't think in a strategic and structural way, and we keep, taking a very surface approach to issues. So if you want to move away from oil, what I believe we should do, and what I will do as president of Nigeria, is to create the environment for an innovation-led economy. That's number one. Number two, I will move for the abolition of the Land Use Act, the constitutional amendment to remove the Land Use Act from the Constitution. Number three, we will inject capital into the economy, and I will do that by creating a massive venture capital fund that will begin to finance businesses, new businesses for people, youth, and other people who are unemployed, and also fund the products of innovation.
All right, let's come back to what the Minister of Budget and National Planning said.
Yeah.
He mentioned the need to improve revenue generation, and he refers to the current tax amnesty. Of course, since last year, the VAIDS, that the Voluntary Assets Income Declaration Scheme, was even extended. It was to expire in March, but was extended. He hopes that some revenue will be generated from these means.
Yes.
Do you think it's going to boost the economy in any way, in any form?
Well, I should hope it does. I mean, I hope that if they have more revenue, it helps the government to be able to handle a number of responsibilities. But you see, there are deeper issues. What do you do about the fact that you're spending 70, 80, 90% of the federal budget on recurrent expenditure? How do you change that profile? You can get a lot of money and keep using it the wrong way. Do you see the point? So that's what I'm saying. There are certain structural decisions that need to be made, some heavy lifts that need to be made in the Nigerian economy, but there is no political will to do so. Therefore, we're going to be on the yo-yo train. Today, oil price is decent, and we feel we're doing well, but at some point, it's going to crash again. That's the dynamic of natural resource-led economies, and that's why we're poor. until we stop relying on revenues from natural resources. Do you know what happened? When we could have made good use of the revenues from oil 30, 40 years ago by setting up a sovereign wealth fund that would act as a buffer, for the rainy day. But we didn't, and we left it too late. We set up a sovereign wealth fund in 2013, and we just have $2 billion in it or something like that. That's a start, but we could have done much better if we had economic foresight. So I am saying that, if I were to be president of Nigeria, I would bring a very strong and robust economic worldview to the governance of this country. And based on that, we'll create a strategy that will transform our economy over a period of 5 to 10 years. That requires, first of all, intellectual knowledge and understanding of what needs to be done. Secondly, it requires the political will to do it. But Nigeria's politicians never like to take hard decisions. They just want to be popular, while Nigerians remain in poverty. So their incompetence, their inability to lead keeps us poor. And this has to change. And who's going to change it? Only Nigerian citizens, by voting in a different type of leadership.
All right. We've thrown politics into the wish list too. But let me come back to infrastructure.
Yeah.
The debt trap we found ourselves in because we need to boost infrastructure across the length and breadth. You're traveling across the length and breadth of the country, so you get the opportunity firsthand to see the state, decrepit state of infrastructure across many parts of the country.
That's
right. Government officials time and again tell us we must borrow money to meet the deficit, which is estimated at several trillions of naira. What do you think? The other day, Eze Durioma, the head of the Population Commission, said Nigeria hit 198 million, population growth rate at 6% high. How do you match population growth rate with infrastructural deficit?
That's part of the tragedy, because Nigeria's population growth, based on current trends, is very serious cause for worry. If we continue to grow at this rate without increasing GDP per capita, without cutting down the poverty rate, it doesn't matter what focus you place on physical infrastructure, because you don't have human capital to maintain that physical infrastructure and to improve the quality of the economy and the quality of lives of Nigerians. You're just going to be, you have a lot of unemployment rising, and then you have population growing. What's the future? You are looking at a potential time bomb. That's where we're going in Nigeria. The discussion about physical infrastructure, I'm not saying that physical infrastructure is not important. It is very important because it makes the cost of business lower. If things, you have electricity, you have good roads and things like that. But we are neglecting the development of human capital. And that is the most strategic thing that drives every economy. So going to build all these physical things just so you can win an election, you can point and say, oh, we're building roads, we're building that. But the fundamental, push for Nigeria to move from poverty into prosperity, we don't have it. And the reason is because we're focused on the wrong priorities. That's the point. Everything in this country is about short-term thinking. People want to win an election next year, so they'll go and borrow the whole money from the whole world, put our children's future generations in debt to come and tell you that they're building infrastructure. But if we had managed ourselves much better, I think we could have still achieved that same infrastructure, but also focusing on the mental infrastructure. I believe that mental infrastructure is the #1 infrastructure that any government must focus on. That is to say, education, skills, productive knowledge that can create an economy that creates jobs, and you can export complex products that you manufacture inside Nigeria. That is the secret of the wealth of nations.
Right.
And our political leaders still haven't got it.
Udo Udoma says the economy is slow, and he says the target is 7% by 2020. We have 2 years to go to 2020. I want to know if you think that is feasible. Now, recall that the government has tried to diversify the economy going into agriculture. Now, he started this Anchors Borrowers program, which has been receiving a lot of accolades. But with the recent farmers and the herdsmen clashes, do you think this will be an avenue to get to that 7% we hope to attain in 2020?
First of all, I doubt that we will achieve that 7% target. I doubt it very much. I don't see how we're going to be able to achieve it. Second, as I've said earlier, that is actually not the real issue. The real issue is the quality of life of Nigerians, which nobody's talking about. And of course, then you talked about the herdsmen issue and then diversification into agriculture. Let me explain a few things. When we talk about diversifying an economy, what we are talking about is diversifying what brings in foreign exchange, diversifying what creates wealth, what creates production for export. These are the two things we need to be talking about. So diversifying from oil into solid minerals, exporting raw solid minerals, you're diversifying your poverty profile, essentially. Diversifying from oil into agriculture, when the agriculture is not a mechanized sort, it doesn't use a lot of technology to produce larger amount of crops for smaller acreage. Do you see what I'm saying? So when that diversification is not focused on the development of the value chain from subsistence farming, moving more into industrialized agriculture and agro-allied industries, again, for export. That's what would be a real diversification. But just to be diversifying into subsistence agriculture and creating the Anchor Borrowers program, I don't have a problem with it, you know, but I'm just saying that these things are the things that you're chasing shadows. You see, what's going to turn this country around is not these, you know, short-term things that politicians do for popularity. No, there are some structural, there's some structural measures that need to be taken for Nigeria's economy to really be transformed. And this government is not doing it. Past governments have not done it because they have also been slaves to oil. So it takes a certain type of mindset to move away from this. And it takes a certain type of understanding of what I call economic complexity. I don't even call it that. That's what it's called. And that is, how do you manufacture complex products and export them? This calls for what is called productive knowledge. And that is where we come back to the question of human capital, skills. There's a certain type, if you want to invest in Nigeria, for example, if you want to do massive foreign investment projects, the first thing that the foreign investor is looking at is what is the level of skilled labor in the country in which you're investing. That's number one. So that's why you cannot have a Boeing manufacturing plant in Nigeria, because we do not have Nigerians who have the level of skills to manufacture a Boeing plane here. Do you see what I'm saying? So then the next thing the foreign investor will look at is what's the state of the infrastructure. So if you want to, for example, attract foreign investment, you should attract foreign investment beginning with the educational sector. Do you see what I'm saying? If you go to Rwanda today, all the prestigious foreign universities in America and so on, they're setting up campuses there. Because President Kagame is a strategic person. He's a futurist. He has a world view. So he tackles problems at the foundation. He doesn't do what we do in Nigeria, just trying to be popular and solving no real problems. So we should start with investments in education in this country. We should have the educational system completely revamped in order to create the kinds of skills that actually can grow an economy and create development, not just chasing GDP growth so that you can come and flash a statistic. Sorry, that's short-sighted in my view.
All right, so let's talk some politics now.
Yes.
This next year is going to be strategic. It's also going to be symbolic because it's going to represent from 1999 to 2019, it will be 20 years since we embarked on this Fourth Republic democratic experience. It's also going to be the first time you're going to have voters vote in this country who did not see the berets and the boots, you know. So you will have people who will vote who have never seen military dictatorship in their lives before. So tell me, as a political economist,
yes,
do you have respect for Nigeria's political legacy right now or disdain?
I have disdain for Nigeria's political class. Their failure is a source of disappointment to me, I would say. and certainly disappointment to the citizens of this country. And I believe that unless we change that political class, we will not be able to make progress. You know, we are now the poverty capital of the world. Nigeria has the largest numbers of absolutely poor people of any country in the world. And that's a big problem. What's the future of our children? We have just about 4,000 megawatts of electricity. We have 15 million children of school age out of school, and about 6 million of them are girls. So when you look at all the indices of development, if you look at our healthcare system, it's one of the worst in the world. So, but instead of looking at the real things, you know, our politicians just focus on smoke screen, you know, American wonder, just to be able to get votes. Then they'll go and be distributing stomach infrastructure to poor people whom they have impoverished. But they'll go and give them money because in their poverty, they will accept that money. And then they will be brought back to power again. And after distributing that money, once they get into office, what are they going to do? First thing, they make a beeline for the treasury to be able to recover what they spent on the election. So you see how the cycle of poverty continues in this country. So the real solution is political, and that is to elect competent and visionary leadership. And that's what I have put myself forward to Nigerians to say, that's the type of leadership that I will provide. Nigeria's next president must be somebody who can manage Nigeria's economy.
Okay, in your opening statement, you talked about something you removed from the Constitution.
Yes, the Land Use Act.
Yes.
Yeah,
now, another question for you is the concurrent list and the exclusive list.
Sure.
On the exclusive list, we have the likes of solid minerals exclusively for the government, the federal government.
The federal government.
Now,
yes.
do you think if states have the power to use the minerals in their states, would that better the economy in Nigeria, or do you think it's going to remain status quo?
Well, I think, you know, I think it would be better if, first of all, let me just step back a little bit. I believe that Nigeria needs to be constitutionally restructured, period. And that includes that mineral ownership should go, the ownership of solid minerals or, for example, many natural resources should go to the regions. I believe that Nigeria should be restructured, but along regional lines, not along state lines. Why? Because the current state structure is not viable. Many states are not viable. But if you have regions, say the 6 geopolitical regions, economies of scale will work, and it will create a better economy for Nigeria. The main reason why we should restructure along regional lines is economic, in my view. That is what will bring economic development. You see what I'm saying? Now if you say that the regions should own whatever natural resources, like the northern states, for example, they have a lot of solid minerals, and they own it. But of course, those regions must pay a tax to the center, to the federal government. Otherwise, you're not part of a country. So I don't think, you know, states owning or regions owning natural resources, you know, it can help them, but only if those natural resources are value added before they are exported. Otherwise, they would be repeating what the federal government has been doing for 50 years, and the result will be the same. The wealth of nations is never created by natural resources. I'm sorry. The wealth of nations is always created by complex economic products.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Professor Kingsley Moghalu. He's a political economist, lawyer, as well as a former official of the United Nations, because importantly, he was a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and now a presidential hopeful. Thank you very much, sir, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'll take another break, and when we come back, we have sports with Nira. Please stay with us.